Lewis Hamilton had a wild ride in Shanghai. His weekend began positively with his P2 finish in the sprint race. However, it quickly turned into a nightmare when he qualified in P18 and faced difficulties overtaking weaker cars during the race. It was a race filled with insane ups and downs, but Hamilton should consider himself a lucky man for finishing in the points at the end. Now, the question is, has he given up on Mercedes? It's clear he's facing challenges and isn't achieving his usual top positions. This race highlighted Hamilton's struggles even with a different strategy. Despite starting in a promising position, he couldn't make much progress. Throughout the race, he could be seen expressing frustration over the car's speed and balance. On the other hand, his teammate had a fantastic race, bringing in valuable points for Mercedes. Without some lucky breaks, Hamilton might not have scored any points at all. But thanks to his teammate's strong performance, Mercedes' position in the Constructor Championship was secured. You can guess how relieved Mercedes was that Hamilton managed to score points after a tough qualifying session where a lockup at the hairpin hurt his performance. They admitted they could have sent him out earlier for a better chance in qualifying. Despite this, considering the circumstances, they were pleased with the outcome. George's main goal was to overtake Alonso and Piastri, which he achieved with a strong final stint. He managed tyre degradation well, keeping Alonso from threatening him at the end. Hamilton struggled with rear tyre temperature throughout the race, possibly due to the car's balance. Although he benefited from safety cars, he couldn't quite secure P8, as he couldn't get close enough to Piastri for DRS. The weekend had its ups and downs, with changes after the sprint races possibly affecting performance. However, Mercedes could still compete well against McLaren, Ferrari and Alonso's Aston Martin. The team spokesperson disagreed with Hamilton's comments about the car being too slow, suggesting it was competitive against other teams. And you can't help but notice that this issue primarily affected Hamilton alone. Russell, on the other hand, was realistically contending with the top teams and executing strong moves early in the race. He was able to maximize his car's potential. While Hamilton admitted fault for his struggles from qualifying to the main event, the continuous experimentation with the car, despite his successful P2 finish in the sprint event, indicates a lack of trust in the W15's consistency, either from Hamilton or the team. Hamilton commented on the matter saying, "The car is massively different from what it was in the sprint race. We changed a lot, but I'm hoping the race is going to be a bit better, and I hope it rains." Well, the rain didn't come, and Hamilton struggled to gain positions on the soft tyres. This forced him into an early pit stop and a change in strategy, ultimately pushing him further back on the grid. When discussing the car's pace, the 7-time world champion described it as "so slow." These remarks came while he was chasing an Alpine, arguably the weakest car on the grid. In fact, they're the only ones to have regressed during the winter period, building a worse car than in previous years. In the race, issues persisted despite attempts to fix the strategy. Hamilton was even at risk of not scoring any points, if not for the safety car and strategic adjustments. Even with these changes, he struggled to overtake Piastri, who had a damaged car and was on a similar strategy. This really highlights what a rough race Hamilton was having. He had great difficulty in passing the McLaren despite a 1-second difference between them. The 7-time world champion expressed frustration with the car, stating, "It's just sliding around everywhere. I don't know, it just feels like something is broken. It's probably just this balance. It's really bad." Following these remarks, many F1 experts compared Hamilton's pace with Russell's, noting that although Russell finished only 3 places ahead of Hamilton, he had a much better overall weekend, albeit below his usual standards. Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff mentioned that the experiments conducted on Hamilton's car had their effects. But what's really interesting is that during an interview about setup changes, Hamilton appeared pretty unbothered, laughing and saying that the car couldn't be any worse than before, but it turned out to be exactly that. This could suggest that the 7-time world champion has already given up on trying to resolve the issues with Mercedes. Despite assurances from his race engineer Bono that they would address the problems after the race, Hamilton may not be fully invested in the process. With Mercedes now fighting for P4 in the Constructors' Championship, behind Ferrari, McLaren and Red Bull, it seems Hamilton's focus may be elsewhere. Earlier in the weekend, he attributed his struggles to changes in the car's setup following the sprint race, expressing doubt that things could improve from their current state. His second-place finish right behind Verstappen has intensified observations about the team dynamics. In the debrief, Wolff reportedly addressed Hamilton by his last name, which is a departure from his usual practice of calling him Lewis. Despite assurances from his race engineer Bono that they would address the problems after the race, Hamilton may not be fully invested in the process. This subtle change suggests that the internal tension within the team, often referred to as a Cold War, is ongoing and may be escalating. Consequently, there's talk about potential setup changes from Hamilton's side as a result of this growing separation between him and Wolff. However, his teammate Russell clarified that their setups didn't differ much during qualifying, where he managed to reach Q3 and start right behind the Ferrari drivers in P8. Russell stated, "We are pretty similar on the setups." He did acknowledge a slight directional difference, but noted that overall, their approaches were very similar. Both drivers made significant changes from the sprint race, and Russell believed that with optimized performance, they could have qualified even better, but their ultimate goal is to compete for victories and championships, hopefully in the next year. He even expressed surprise at Hamilton's result, saying that as the greatest driver of all time, Hamilton shouldn't be in that position. He reiterated the team's collective aim to push forward and make significant progress as the season progresses. With all this in mind, it's clear that Hamilton's struggles at Mercedes are unique, and it's unlikely he'll be able to fully address them to compete at the front. It's obvious that Russell is the prioritized driver, as evidenced by his car being protected from experimental changes. This suggests Russell isn't struggling to extract performance from the W15. Hamilton is facing one of the toughest seasons in his career, with the possibility of finishing without a podium in a full race event. Given the challenges he faced with the W15 after the sprint race, do you think Hamilton's performance in Shanghai was justified? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.